Good morning, students. The topic for today's class is free consent. So before I go into the details of this topic, let me remind you all about definition of contract and the essentials of a valid contract. As you already know, the definition of contract, which is given under section 2H of Indian Contract Act 1872. The definition goes like this. Contract is an agreement enforceable by law. So an agreement becomes enforceable by law only when it satisfies certain features. Now let us have a glance at the features which is given under section 10 of Indian Contract Act. So the first essential of valid contract, as you can see, is offer and acceptance. So there must be two parties to a contract, one person making the offer and the other person giving the acceptance. The person who makes the offer is known as offerer and the person to whom you are making the offer is known as offeree. The second feature is intention to create legal relationship. It means both the parties must have a desire to create legal relationship and not social relationship. Third one is lawful consideration. Consideration means something in return. That is, both the parties must get something in return when they are entering into contract. Fourth one is lawful object. That is, the purpose of the contract must be lawful. It must not be illegal, immoral or opposed to public policy. The next one is capacity of parties. Here capacity is nothing but the eligibility. That is, every person is eligible to enter into contract provided he is a major, he should be sound mind and he should not be disqualified by law. Then the next one is the agreements must not be declared as void. Then the next one is certainty of meaning. It's nothing but the terms of the contract must be clear, specific and not vague. Then the next feature is possibility of performance. That is, the contract should be capable of being performed. That is, if the contract, whatever you are entering into, if it is uncertain, physically or legally impossible, then the contract becomes void. The next feature is legal formalities. So whatever might be the required legal formalities, the parties have to fulfill it. Now the last essential of valid contract is free consent, which will be our today's topic. It is one of the pre-requirement of law that there must be consent between parties. If there is no consent, then there is no contract. Now let us see the meaning of the word consent. Consent in simple words is nothing but approval, acceptance or willingness given to an offer made. Now let us take an example. Like if I make an offer to you and if you give the acceptance, it's nothing but you have given your consent. Now let us see the definition of the word consent, which is given under section 13 of Indian Contract Act 1872. So what does consent states? It's nothing but it is consensus ad idem, which means meeting of minds or identical minds. That is, both the parties must have common thinking, same thinking or proper understanding regarding the subject matter of the contract. So now the question comes, when can both the parties have same thinking or consensus ad idem? So two or more persons are said to be in consent when they agree upon same thing and in the same sense. Now in this definition, we have to stress upon two words, that is agreeing upon same thing and in the same sense. Now to understand this same thing, let us take one example. To understand this word same thing, now suppose you think I make an offer to you. I've got two vehicles, one is a car and one is a bike. Now I'm making an offer to you like, I want to sell my vehicle to you for rupees 30,000. Will you buy it? And suppose if you give an acceptance, yes ma'am, I'll buy your vehicle for rupees 30,000. Now in this example, when I'm making an offer, I'm not specifying which vehicle it is. For me, I'm referring it to my bike and you are thinking that I'm referring to my car. So can I say that we both are understanding the contract in the same thing? No. For me, I'm referring to bike and for you, it is in reference to car. So we can clearly say that both the parties have not agreed upon in the same thing. So why do you think the confusion has taken place? It's because the words of the offer or the words of the acceptance are not clear. So when can you say that there is consensus ad idem between the parties? That is, the rule is the terms of the contract, I mean to say the words used in by making the offer, while giving the acceptance, it should be clear, specific and not vague. Now, what is the other part of this definition, that is agreeing upon in the same sense. Now to understand this, let us take one more example. Now, I just want to make an offer to you. Suppose think I have got two cars. One is a brand made by Honda and the other is a brand made by Maruti. So I am just making an offer. I want to sell a car to you for rupees maybe 50,000. Will you buy it? And you give the acceptance, yes ma'am, I'll buy a car from you. So when I'm making an offer, I'm not specifying which car it is. And you just simply give the acceptance, yes ma'am, I'll buy a car. That means when I'm making an offer, I'm referring to Honda car and maybe you are thinking that I'm referring to Maruti car. Now here, we both are agreeing upon the same thing. Both are cars only. But are we agreeing upon in the same sense? For me, I meant Honda car and for you, you meant it as Maruti car. It means we both the parties are not agreeing upon in the same sense. So what is the meaning of consensus ad item? It means both the parties must have a proper thinking. Now the same example, if I had asked you all, I want to sell my Honda car to you, will you buy it? Then the offer would have been clear. So to have a consensus ad item in the contract, the terms of the offer and acceptance must be clear, specific. Okay, now our next concept will be free consent. So now let us see the meaning of the word free consent. In simple words, free consent is nothing but consent which is given with free will and wish, independently, without any fear or force. Now let us see the definition of free consent, which is given under section 14 of Indian Contract Act 1872. The definition goes like this. Consent is said to be free when it is not caused by the following elements, that is coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation and mistake. So, if any of these elements are present in the contract, it means consent is not free. So when can you say consent is free? It means any of these elements or these elements must not be present. Now, if these elements or any of these elements are present in the contract, then that concept is known as flaw in consent. Flaw in consent is nothing but absence of free consent, which is the opposite of free consent. Okay, now let's see each of this element, that is coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation and mistake in detail. Okay, now let's see the first element of free consent, that is coercion. Now first let's start with the meaning of the word coercion. Coercion in simple words means threatening someone to enter into contract using physical pressure or physical force. Now to understand this, let us take an example. Now suppose you think like you have got a house worth 50 lakhs and I want to buy your house at any cost. Now I am telling you, like I am threatening you that if you don't sell your house which is worth 50 lakhs for only 1 lakh to me, I am going to kill you, or I am going to kidnap you, or I am going to burn you, or I am going to kidnap your daughter or son. Okay, now you have given your consent to sell me your house which is worth 50 lakhs to me for only 1 lakh. So it clearly implies that I have used coercion. Now let us see the definition of the word coercion, which is given under section 15 of Indian Contract Act 1872. The definition goes like this. Committing or threatening to commit any act which is forbidden by Indian Penal Code 1860. So what is the meaning of this word committing? It means you are doing or you are threatening to do something which is prohibited, which is not permitted under Indian Penal Code. Now just now I gave an example of where I am threatening you to sell your house for rupees only 1 lakh. I mean, I am telling you that I will kill you, I will murder you, I will burn you. Now killing someone, murdering someone, kidnapping someone, all these are prohibited as per Indian Penal Code 1860. Now, what is the other part of the definition? The other part of the definition is unlawful detaining or threatening to detain the property of the other person. So, what is the meaning of this word detain? It means you are trying to forcibly have control over others' property. Now, to understand this, let us take an example. Now, suppose two parties are there, A and B. You think A is the boss in an office, he is the CEO of the office, and B is working as an accountant. Now B wants to leave the job because of some reason, and obviously as an accountant all the books of accounts will be under his custody. Now B, the accountant, is threatening his boss. Until and unless you relieve me from all my duties, I'm not going to hand over the books of accounts to you. So indirectly it means that the accountant is using coercion. Okay, now let's see another example to understand this word coercion. Now suppose you think I've got one shop, a general store for which I've got a valid license, but one of the municipal officer in the Hyderabad area, he comes and tells me, if you don't vacate this shop, if you don't vacate this place, I'm going to take away all the important documents or I'm going to take away all the assets, for which I agree. Now, it clearly means that the municipal officer has used coercion. Now, let us understand this word coercion with the help of one case, Ranganayakamma versus Alvar Shetty. Now, in this case, Ranganayakamma was a young girl of 13 years. She lost her husband, so as per Hindu tradition, you all know the pyre should be lit by the sun. But in this case, Ranganayakamma was not having any children. So, Mr. Alvar Shetty, the father-in-law of the girl, and the relatives threatened that girl that until and unless you adopt a boy from the relatives, we are not going to take your husband's body for cremation. Now, this poor girl, she decided to adopt a boy. Now, later on, she went to the court for setting aside the adoption. Now, in this case, it was clearly declared that coercion was being used and the adoption was set aside. Okay, now let's see what is the effect of coercion. Now, the effect of coercion is the contract is voidable at the option of the injured party. Now, as you already know, what is the meaning of voidable contract? Voidable contract is that contract which is enforceable by law at the option of one of the party but not at the option of the other party. Now, the question comes when coercion is being used, what can the injured party do? Now, who is an injured party as per law? The injured party is a person who has suffered loss. Now, the injured party has got two options. That is, either he can continue with the contract or he can avoid the contract. So, the word voidable has come from the word avoid or cancel. So, the injured party will have two options. That is, either he can continue with the contract or he can cancel the contract. So, this is the effect of coercion. Now, let's see the second element of free consent, which is undue influence. Now, what is the meaning of undue influence? It's nothing but obtaining the consent of a party using moral pressure, or you can say as emotional pressure or psychological pressure. Now, let us see the definition of undue influence, which is given under section 16 of Indian Contract Act 1872. The definition goes like this. The relationship existing between the parties is such that one person is in a position to dominate on the other person and he uses this position to obtain undue advantage. So you can say as undue influence is nothing but one person uses his position to dominate on the other person. Now let us see a few situations where we can clearly say that undue influence has been used. Now, the first situation, when a person holds real or apparent authority over the other person. Now I'll tell you a few examples where, while looking at the examples, clearly you can say who is dominating on the other person. Now if you take an example of master and servant, it's very clear that obviously that master will dominate on the servant. Now if you take another example, moneylender and borrower, in this relationship it's very clear that obviously moneylender will dominate on the borrower. Then the other example could be a boss and the employee. Now let us see second situation where we can say undue influence has been used. Now, when there is fiduciary relationship between the parties. Now what does this fiduciary relationship mean? That is relationship of trust and confidence. So wherever there is a relationship of trust and confidence, this relationship of trust and confidence can be used as a weapon to have undue influence on the other party. Now let us take few examples. Now if you take an example of parent and a child, now next a doctor and a patient, now next a lawyer and a client, or a spiritual guru and devotee. Now in these examples, all the parties have got a fiduciary relationship, that is the relationship of trust and confidence where one party can dominate on the other party. Now the third situation is where one person seeing the opposite person's age, illness, mental or bodily distress will try to take unfair advantage. Now in the example of a lawyer and client, now if suppose if the lawyer says, if you don't pay me extra fees, I am not going to fight your case, or maybe I'll delay your case. I mean, this example clearly it's a case of undue influence. Now if you take another example of this doctor and patient. Now suppose you think I am very famous heart surgeon in Hyderabad, I am the only one best heart surgeon. And if a patient comes to my hospital, and suppose if I say that until and unless you pay me 10 lakhs, you deposit 10 lakhs, I am not going to start the operation. So obviously here the doctor is taking undue advantage over the patient. Now to understand this word undue influence, let us take one case which is Rani Annapurna versus Swaminath. Now in this case, Rani Annapurna was an old widow. Now she was in need of money, so she went to this Swaminath who was a money lender. And Swaminath, he has agreed to give loan, but with one condition, that she has to repay the loan with 100% interest. Now obviously repaying the loan with 100% interest, it clearly means that moneylender is trying to take advantage over the situation of this lady. Now she went to court, and when she went to court, the rate of 100% was reduced to 24%. So this is a case regarding undue influence. Now coming to the effect of undue influence, I mean to say what can the injured party do if the other person is dominating on you. The same thing, the effect is same like coercion, that is nothing but the contract becomes voidable. That is, the injured party will have two options, that is, either he can perform with the contract or he can avoid or cancel the contract. As we already know, like what is coercion and what is undue influence. Now let us see the differences between both. Now we'll see the two main differences. Coercion will come under section 15 and undue influence will come under section 16. Coercion is use of physical force or physical pressure, and undue influence is use of mental pressure or moral pressure. Now the next element of free consent is fraud. Now what is the meaning of fraud? In simple words, fraud means cheating a person. Now let us see the definition of fraud, which is given under section 17 of Indian Contract Act 1872. Now in the definition of fraud we have three parts. The first one, it is a false statement made knowingly. It's nothing but you very well know that you are telling lies. Then the second one is concealing the facts. It means you are hiding the truth. Now the third one is, why is that you are making a false statement and why is that you are hiding the truth? Because your intention is to cheat the other party. Now let us take an example to understand this word fraud. Now suppose you think I just make an offer to you for the sale of my car and I tell you that this is an imported car, but actually it is a local made car which was repaired and repainted. And this fact I have hidden from you. So obviously in this example it's a clear case of fraud. Now we'll understand this word fraud in a better way with the help of this case, which is Peake versus Gurney. Now this is a case between a company and a shareholder. So once a company issued a prospectus, and as you already know, company should mention only facts in the prospectus. But in this case, company did not mention anything about the existence of liabilities. So when the company is not mentioning anything about the existence of liabilities, it is giving an impression to the public that the company is doing very well, which in fact it is not doing. So based upon the prospectus, a shareholder, he purchased the shares. But after purchasing the shares, he comes to know the fact that actually the company's position was financially not good. So in this case, it was declared that the company has committed fraud. Now we'll come to the effect of fraud. I mean to say, what can the injured party do if the other person has applied fraud? Now again the same thing, the contract is voidable. That is, for the injured party, he'll have two options. Either he can continue with the contract or he can avoid the contract. Then the other remedy available to the injured party is he can as well claim damages. Now what does damages mean in law? Damages is nothing but the monetary compensation. Yeah, coming to the next element of free consent, that is nothing but misrepresentation. So what is the meaning of misrepresentation? It's nothing but it's an innocent misstatement made. Now coming to the definition which is given under section 18 of Indian Contract Act, it is a false statement made innocently or unknowingly. It means you are making a false statement but you are thinking it to be true. And the next element of misrepresentation is you don't have any intention to cheat. Now, what is the difference between fraud and misrepresentation? In fraud, you have an intention to cheat, but in misrepresentation, you don't have any intention to cheat. In fraud, you very well know that you are telling lies. In misrepresentation, you are thinking that the statement, whatever you have made, is true. And in fraud, it is a false statement made knowingly, and in misrepresentation, it's a false statement made unknowingly. Now, let us understand this misrepresentation with an example. Now, suppose you think I've got two new textbooks, and I tell to my friend, like, will you want to buy a new textbook because I've got an extra textbook with me? And my friend purchased a textbook. She came to know that few of the pages were missing. Even I was not aware about this. Now, in this case, can my friend blame me that I have committed fraud? Obviously no. Why? Because even I was not aware that the pages were missing. Why? Because the book was a new book. Now, we'll take an example. Now, an uneducated person, he wants to take a life insurance policy. Now, we are educated people, we'll be knowing our date of birth. But what about uneducated persons in olden days? If you ask them like when you were born, they'll simply say I was born on the day of Diwali or I was born on the day of Christmas. Now, this uneducated person, he has taken a life insurance policy and he tells to the insurance agent that my age is only 30. But when medical verification was done, the age was shown as 35. And you all know one rule in insurance policy, the lesser the age, the lesser will be the premium, and higher the age, higher will be the premium. Now, obviously in this case, the insurance company cannot blame that person that he has committed fraud. So obviously it's a clear example of misrepresentation. Now coming to the effect of misrepresentation, again the effect is same. That is, the contract is voidable. That is, the injured party will have two options. That is, either he can continue with the contract or he can avoid the contract. But only thing is, the injured party will not be able to claim any damages or monetary compensation from the court. Now the last element of free consent is mistake. So what do you mean by the word mistake? Mistake in simple word means erroneous belief about something. Now let us go on to the types of mistakes. The mistake is basically divided into two main types, that is mistake of law and mistake of facts. Under mistake of law, which is given under section 21, it has two types, that is mistake of Indian law and mistake of foreign law. Now coming to the mistake of facts, again it is basically divided into two, that is bilateral mistake and unilateral mistake. Now let us see the explanation of this mistake of law. The first one under this is mistake of Indian law. That is, when two parties commit any mistake regarding Indian rules and regulations, then what is the rule applicable here? The rule applicable here is ignorance of law is not an excuse. Now what is the meaning of this rule? That is, if you simply say that you are not aware about the law, it's not going to work out. Now to understand this, let us take an example. Now you want to ride a bike or a car on the road, and everyone knows very well that you need to have a license. And suppose you think you are riding a car or a bike on the road, and if the traffic police catches you for not having a license, now can you simply give an excuse that I am not aware about this law? Obviously no. As you are an Indian citizen, every Indian citizen need to be aware about the rules and regulations. Now let us take another example. As you already know that agreement with minor is void ab initio. It means invalid from the beginning itself. Now suppose if I give a loan to a minor, and at the time of repayment if he simply says I am not going to repay the loan. Now if I go to court and file a case saying that the minor is not repaying the loan, do you think will I win the case? Obviously no. Why? Because the rule is agreement with minor is void ab initio. Now if I simply say that I am not aware about the rule, it's not going to work out. So what is the rule regarding mistake of Indian law? The rule applicable here is ignorance of law is not an excuse. Then coming to the next one, that is mistake of foreign law. Now suppose if you enter into contract with any foreign national of other countries, and if you commit any mistake regarding any contracts, then what will be the effect of that? the effect of this will be same as mistake of facts and the contract becomes void. Now let us come on to the types under mistake of facts. Let us see now bilateral mistake in detail, which is given under section 20. Now, what is the meaning of bilateral mistake? Now, as the name itself goes, bi, it means two parties. That is, both the parties are under a mistake about the facts or the subject matter of the contract. Now, in such case, the contract becomes void. Now, to understand this concept of bilateral mistake, we'll take an example. Now, suppose you think A and B are two parties and both are residing in Hyderabad, and they want to enter into contract regarding sale of a horse. And where the horse is not in Hyderabad. Suppose you think the horse is at A's house in Chennai. The horse is kept at a stable. A stable is a place where horses are kept. Now, both the parties have entered into contract, but unfortunately, the horse fell ill and it dies. Now, both the parties have entered into contract thinking that the horse is alive. It means both the parties have committed mistake regarding the existence of the subject matter, and in this example, the subject matter is horse. So, in this example, obviously the agreement becomes void. Why? Because both the parties have done a mistake regarding the facts of the contract. Now, in the same way, this bilateral mistake can be committed relating to price, relating to quality, relating to quantity or a title or identity of the subject matter. So obviously the effect will be the contract becomes void. Why? Because the mistake committed here is mutual. Now the next one is unilateral mistake, which is given in section 22. As the name itself goes, uni is nothing but one. That is, when only one party is under a mistake about the subject matter or the facts of the contract. And in such case, what will be the effect of the contract? The contract will be valid. Why? Because only one party is under a mistake or is doing the mistake. Now to understand this, we'll take an example. Now I go to a jewelry shop. So actually the shop is of real and imitation jewelry. So when I go inside the shop, I see a necklace which is of rupees 999. So I like the necklace very much and I purchased it. And when I go home and show it to my mom, she simply tells me it is not a real jewelry necklace, but it is an imitation jewelry. Now when I go back to the shop and question the seller that you have cheated me, obviously I cannot blame the seller. Why? Because I never bothered to verify whether it is a real jewelry, real necklace or an imitation jewelry. So when I did not bother to ask the seller, obviously it will not be the responsibility of the seller to tell me whether it is a real jewelry or imitation jewelry, as because the name of the shop is Real and Imitation Jewelry Shop. Now we'll see another example. Like everybody knows that old rice will have better quality and new rice will have less quality. Now if your mom tells you, please go to a general store and purchase some rice, and without asking the seller, you just purchase new rice and you come home. And when your mom cooks the rice, she comes to know it is a new quality rice. Why? Because the entire rice was smashed. Now when you go back to the seller and tell him, please return back the price, do you think the seller will return the price to you? Obviously no. Why? Because it was your mistake. So the rule applicable here is when one party commits a mistake, the contract will be valid.